All right, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building, where today we are talking about how we start our day. And one of the people on the Facebook group said we should have this in the morning, but unfortunately, that's not how it works. I can't do stuff in the morning. No, I can, but I usually have other things I'm doing in the morning. So, yes, how we start the day. I think, honestly, that we get so accustomed to our routines that we forget that not everybody starts the day the same way, right? And there are certain things that are considered indispensable, and there are certain things that are considered optional. Yeah, I mean, just the other day, my family and I at the dinner table were talking about breakfast in Japan, and how interesting it had been for us to discover a really different way of eating breakfast. So for example, breakfast in the United States is often very sweet, and involving, donuts sometimes, but like cereals, which are incredibly sweet, or pancakes, which are very sweet, and waffles, which are sweet. If you see my point. Now, obviously, we have the alternatives, which are the sort of eggs and bacon style.
But having that, yeah, you get the sweet as the sides, like, yeah, you get the muffin, the fruit.
Yeah. You definitely, I think Americans really expect their breakfast to be sweet. I remember when we went to New Orleans, and we went to a restaurant for breakfast, and I couldn't find anything on their menu that resembled breakfast to me. And that's just, another state in the United States. Obviously, this was a fancy restaurant. I think I ended up having fish with pecans for breakfast. It was delicious, just very unexpected. Anyway, and then of course, Japan. So the Japanese traditional breakfast that you get, at least at a hotel, or the kind of hotel where we would stay, often involved, rice and seaweed and possibly fish and some raw egg. And or sometimes it'll involve rice gruel, right? And some folks who travel as tourists in Japan have real trouble with that. I don't recall. I mean, I tried it myself and I'm cool with it. It's definitely not my first expectation for breakfast. But, I'm game, as it were. But yeah, and then of course there's coffee. Yeah. So for you guys, what does breakfast consist of? Do you guys eat breakfast?
I eat breakfast.
Most do our secondary world people eat breakfast.
Yeah, but it's not always a thing, and it wasn't always a thing for me. I had to consciously make it a part of my routine again, because I don't have to get up in the morning and go somewhere. I don't even have to get up in the morning and get my kid ready for school. So there's no external pressure for breakfast. So I had to consciously say, all right, I need to put food into my body before I can actually accomplish anything else.
Well, yeah, I hear you on that.
Actually saying, do this thing. And sometimes I sort of waffle, well, fudge it a little bit. And I'd say, okay, well, this thing that I have to get done today will only take 2 minutes. And I mean, literally 2 minutes. I've timed it. So I can do that before I eat breakfast. And sometimes I stop myself and I say, no, because you'll find something else that will only take 2 minutes, but you really need to have breakfast. I have really easy things. I make cereal in the microwave, like grits or oatmeal or something. In the wintertime, I do that in the microwave. I have toaster waffles because those don't take any real thought, not a lot of decision. They're really simple. And making coffee is sometimes seems very complicated before I've had the coffee, but it's not a thing that requires a lot of preparation. And so once that's all done and I've eaten, I can begin the rest of my day knowing that I did something for myself.
That's good.
Yeah. But it's
so we still have people who are trying to break into the hangout from outside and having trouble. There's something going on with our there's something going on with entering this hangout today.
Can I say something else about breakfast then?
Yes, please do. Say more about breakfast.
Assumptions about breakfast and what it takes to get your breakfast. And because I do things that don't take a lot of prep that are what you call low spoons for breakfast. But if you don't have those available, what do you do? And what about when getting breakfast, your first meal of the day, actually meant going out and catching it? Before
Yeah. So talk about worldbuilding. Yeah.
So, what does starting your day really mean? Does it always start with breakfast? I mean, for most people, it doesn't. It starts with opening your eyes and saying, "Oh, shit, it's morning again."
Yeah.
Or whatever passes for morning on your personal routine, because morning is not a thing I see from the beginning side of my day, usually. If I have to, okay.
Sort of at the end of your day.
This is what I do, the obligatory note of saying that in Japanese the greeting is something I gloss in English is it doth be early because it's archaic, but really all it's saying is wow, it's early.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Ohayo gozaimasu means.
Have you guys heard that before?
I so want to appropriate that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Ohayo gozaimasu is a fancy way of saying it's early.
Yeah, what is wrong with you waking people up at this hour?
It doth be early.
Now for me, breakfast will depend on whether is it a weekday and I'm getting up early and going to work and I'm not eating breakfast at home. I'm just grabbing something and taking it with me to work, or do I have time because it's a weekend and I can actually make breakfast for myself? So what I actually will have depends on the day of the week and how I feel. Do I feel like making eggs? I'm not going to make eggs on a weekday because I'm not going to cook before I leave for work, but on weekends, yes, I will. So it really depends.
Sure.
It's really context dependent on what I will eat for breakfast and how I feel about things. I tend to be more savory on weekends than on weekdays, as I've noticed.
Yeah. My husband's like that, though. He keeps like instant oatmeal in his office. That's what he does for breakfast and cooks on the weekends. Breakfast.
Well, so this is, yeah, go ahead, Kat.
I was going to say, I am not a morning person.
Yeah.
And B, not wedded to the idea that breakfast has to be sweet or bready. And so
we had discussed that a little bit.
I'm pretty sure I'm late, but leftovers. Except I find that I'm not. I used to say that my stomach wasn't awake. Like, and I don't know if that was because I was being forced to eat cold cereal, and I can eat cold cereal with milk over it if it's later in the day and I'm actually like the digestive juices and everything have started or something. I don't know what it is, but at that point I can eat cold cereal. But if I try to do it first thing in the morning, I get these stabbing knife pains. It's really exciting.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. So, that's not exciting to me. That's horrifying.
No, that's that exciting with scare quotes. So I don't know if that's physiological or emotional or what it is. And so the interesting thing to me is that I come from a culture ancestrally that does not do that sweet breakfast, which is kind of famous, but I don't know what that comes from. But my high school memories are going to a boarding school that insisted that you had to do breakfast check before you went to your first classes. And my preference would have been, if I had to go to an 8 a.m. class, I would have liked breakfast at 9 a.m. That was not allowed.
Huh.
And because I had a habit of oversleeping my 8 a.m. class, I was one of the only seniors required to do breakfast check. And so I would skip breakfast check because if I can't get to my 8 a.m. class, I'm certainly not getting to
Yeah. Huh.
7:30 breakfast check. And so I just luckily didn't have a social life anyway, so I just go to Friday night study hall. But yeah, the assumption that one must start one's day with breakfast or it's all ruined. I can't eat. I'm slow
Well,
and
there's
sluggy
certainly
afterward. It doesn't matter what I'm eating.
yeah. I was going to say this idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day is like a cultural narrative,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's one thing. So it's perfectly wonderful to say, okay, let's talk about breakfast because that's how we start our day. But it isn't actually the topic of breakfast is not the topic of the hangout
Yes.
because you don't necessarily start your day with breakfast, as we have just noted.
Morning ablution. What or and rituals. I mean, in some cultures, I mean,
Mhm.
praying for the sunrise or praying at dawn. I mean, thinking of Islam and praying 5 times a day,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
like do you shower before you go to bed or when you wake up? And that seems different. And
Or do you shower at all?
or do you shower? Or do you shower at all? Do you need to shower? Or maybe you just jump. Maybe you just jump in the nearby lake for all your
Well,
world work.
Yeah.
yeah.
Or you have a species that really doesn't need it that much. They prefer their natural musk.
How does your cat wake up in the morning? I mean, do people actually know? Because as far as I know, everybody gets woken up by their cats.
When I
Does the
had
cat
cats,
wake
that
you
was
up?
my case too.
Right?
Yeah.
I know all the rituals that people have of being woken up by their companion animals.
Mm-hmm.
And that for people with companion animals, that tends to be their wake up, is that the companion animal figures out when the adult wake up time is and then make sure that they start the wake up routine before that.
Mhm.
I don't hear my dog is a reliable alarm clock very often. I hear
That's so.
I have to get up at 6:30, and so of course my dog wakes me up at 5:45. That's what I hear.
Yeah, I don't know. Sam's bladder was a pretty reliable alarm clock.
Yeah.
And he would just stand next to the bed and stare at my husband until my husband woke up. And
Yeah.
he wakes up at that time, even though we haven't had the dog for some years now.
There's some gravity in that gaze, I think.
Um,
So yeah.
Well, I mean, companion animals have a goodly number of techniques. Staring, pushing objects off of surfaces.
I like the clatter techniques a lot, and I also like the stand on the chest techniques.
mhm.
Although the
Yeah.
most disturbing one I heard was the cat that would lick the eyelids.
Oh my lordy, that would
Yeah.
hurt.
I was like, whoa.
Chewing the hair. Chewing the hair is one.
Oh yeah, chewing hair. Yep.
No.
So
no.
I
My
did wanna,
my cat knows that I hate the sound of paper.
what does he do? Does he ruffle paper?
He rustles paper. Yeah. But that said, I've managed to free myself from his tyranny by getting a completely digital automatic feeder and having it go off well after I'm awake and making sure to absent myself entirely from the process of them being fed in the morning.
Yeah.
And they have stopped waking me up in the morning. So that was nice.
That's clever.
I'm
Some people wake up to the sound of their coffee being done.
I know about that one. Yeah, my grandmother, going back to prayers, that was I think my grandmother starts her day with prayers, or it's very much part of her routine.
Hmm.
Up at the family altar and all those other things. But
I am going to mention a morning practice that was in Anne Leckie's trilogy, which was making casts. So casting omens for the day. And I thought that was kind of a cool one.
I have to confess that my morning ritual is that I get woken up either by nature or sunlight or possibly a child or the heater or something at some point in the morning before I actually officially have to get up out of bed and go wake up a child. But then I roll over, open up my phone, and start looking at Facebook, probably the last year's memories on Facebook, and that's my wake up ritual. So, but because of my content, it ends up being a sort of a rebooting into myself. And I may write something. And so I know a lot of people who do morning pages. They write or they draw something very early in their morning or during a specified time of their morning as a reconnection to their art or work ritual. And I think that's what that's ended up being for me, which is kind of interesting.
It is interesting.
And then
how many of you need stimulants in the morning?
Yes.
You know, I'm need stimulants all day because of my brain doing that thing that it does where I can't focus if I don't have them. But
And if I take if I take the stimulants too late, then I can't sleep. So it's like I have to cut off the tea, the coffee, the root beer at some point. Otherwise, yeah, I'll be sitting there with my eyes open, thinking I'd like to go to sleep now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's not what caffeine does for me. It's
it levels you, right, Morgan?
Huh? Yeah.
It kind of levels you. Yeah. The effects of caffeine are different for different people.
Mm-hmm. If you have ADD, it's not going to be the same as it is for.
One of the reasons I claim I don't have ADD is because I have wildly varying responses to caffeine. And it's not depending upon the kind of caffeine or the quantity or the time of day. It is something physiological that I have not been able to track.
Fun.
Yeah. Sometimes it makes me drowsy.
That's a little odd.
Sometimes it makes me wake up. Sometimes it does nothing. And I used to be able to drink like green tea or black tea at like 10 o'clock at night and go to sleep right away just fine. Sometimes it would occasionally keep me up. I don't know. It's like rolling dice. And I would say it has no effect to me, except it clearly does.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I do get the jitters and sometimes I don't. And the dose totally varies. It's really exciting.
Hey, it's always a new experience. So my own experience with caffeine is that I cannot have too much of it, or I will start jittering and get heart palpitations, and then 2 hours later, as I come off of it, I will feel very ill.
Wow.
Not get sick, like throw up or anything, but just feel really good.
I have a request for a
stopped
different
having
episode.
quite as much as I used to. Took me a while to figure out that was what was causing it, though, because of the 2 hour delay. It was very odd.
Yeah. My husband does not drink coffee anymore because his cardiologist said, don't do that. Which is one reason that I have a pod coffee maker, because I can make coffee that I need.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Because then I can just make that, and then I don't have to think about whether or not I turn the coffee pot off, which is another thing that is important to me, is not having to think about that. So aside from coffee and food, one of the things that I don't do morning pages at this point. I have to look at my to-do list that I made last night in the starting the day, because I figured out last night what it is I have to do today. So I have to remember to look at that list before, as part of starting my day. Otherwise, it doesn't matter that I made the list.
You're rebooting your brain into what you need to do.
Yeah.
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 And
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's see. Other things that I do in the morning. I wear retainers at night, so I have to take those out. It's not fun. I mean, it's neither here nor there, but like some people wear devices at night, I guess is a fair way of saying it. If you have a CPAP, you have to disengage it before you can start on your day.
Or if they have to put a device on upon waking up, like say a boot for a broken foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Reversing.
then, of course, if you're part of a family and you're expected to participate in waking other people, there are conditions on that as well. And you may be called upon to create the breakfast, or you may be called upon simply to appear at a time and consume the breakfast.
Somebody has woken up to provide you, so you better put your butt in that chair and eat it. And I think that's not a thing that's understood always.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things you do in the morning or when you start your day are things to start the day, and some of them are undoings of things you did to end your day or to get ready for bed, like the CPAP.
Yeah.
And because you had to put the retainers in.
Yep.
Getting out of the pajamas.
Yeah, getting out of pajamas.
Unbraiding your hair, because I usually braid my hair to sleep in. And the thing that I did not have time to do today when I started my day, because, well, it was morning, and that's not a thing I do by choice. You think, okay, how long could it take to unbraid your hair? But I didn't have that place where I could undo it and then make it look like it, because it was just taking out the braid. You actually have to look at it and say, okay, is that
right?
Yeah.
Is it a thing?
I didn't. So
well, I mean, I think part of
get to my appointment.
I think you're on something
that I look that way, that I hadn't done that. And it made it.
We have to decide what presentable is.
And who you have to present to and whether or not you care. In this case, I had a therapy appointment. So when I walked in there and I said, Shannon, this is the day that I've had so far. I didn't even have time to undo this. She's like, okay, that's cool. I get it. For someone else, I might not have. I might have sat in the car and fixed it before I went in. But for her, I can.
Yeah.
She's supposed to see.
So on the topic of getting out of PJs, I will confess that my first son goes into a class and needs to be at school at 6:50. And my second son needs to be at school at 8:10. When I drop my first son off at school, I am often in pajamas in the car. The only thing I do is put on shoes so that I can drive without discomfort.
Yeah. Did you see that school that tried to impose a dress code on the parents doing drop off?
I did see that. Yeah.
I did not see that. Oh, good grief.
Doing drop off?
During drop off, they were saying that mothers couldn't have curlers in their hair, or, if they were wearing a protective cap and all this, that their hair had to be styled for the day when they came to drop the kid off. And there was a big, interesting cultural divide in the ways that people were responding to it, and accusations flying about what was intended by it and all sorts of things. It was a big, big deal.
That's it's a big deal. That you do everything you can to encourage parental participation.
Well, so
and also, was it racism? Because that sounds like racism to me.
So one of the interesting things that happened was in this discussion was that there were people who were Black who were saying, well, we are, as Black people in a racialized community, required to look our best. So the school is reinforcing this is just practicality and reality and a kindness to the students.
Mm.
And so a lot of the outrage was not divided the way one might expect if one was not within that category. And the acceptance of the rolled out of bed look was much more prevalent among racially privileged people, apparently. I did not read all the comments. I heard meta commentary about this, and I found that interesting. It is one of my major complaints that because we live just far enough away that I don't want to walk my child in, and that since I'm currently not driving, I'm relying on other people's rides or Lyft. I don't really want to get into Lyft in my pajamas. And so when my children are late, I do have a whole, great, now I have to get dressed. Because I work from home, I don't want to get dressed.
Yeah.
But because I have a roll out of bed and get going kind of thing, I don't have anybody here to model to my children the whole getting presentable for going out into the world look. And so they're now reaching an age where they're resistant to me combing their hair and everything else in the mornings, or telling them to comb their own hair. And so now we're having a whole discussion where we're actually, I find this conversation fascinating right now because they're not used to the idea that there are morning rituals because they've had a non-morning ritual parent. And I've done my morning rituals after they've gone to school. And so they're a little confused and they feel like I'm being tyrannical. And I'm like, oh, dude, this is quite normal.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain amount of there's a certain amount of ableism involved in a policy that says you have to look like you meant to you need to be presentable. But there's also that there isn't an easy word like ableism for what happens when parents have to be ready before they have time to be ready because they're getting their kids ready.
Yes. And there's also, I've heard some people, I think the phrase is chronism, or CHRON, saying that there's a very strong lean toward morning people in the way we educate our children. So it's made a huge difference to my son that he doesn't have to get up first thing in the morning at the same time that his sister does, who is much more of a happy natural lark. She goes to bed earlier. She wakes up a little more easily in the morning. He likes to stay up until all hours and sleep in late. And given that he's got a parent who might have some sympathy with that, we're not doing a great job of trying to instill that shame about not being a morning person.
No, there shouldn't be shame in. I mean, I feel
it takes all sorts, right?
And people's circadian rhythms are different. I mean, they can be changed, mutilated, and altered. I used to be a much more of a evening and night person. When I moved here to Minnesota, I lived for a while with my friends before I got an apartment on my own. And my late friend Scott was a dedicated, very, very early morning person. And he kind of flipped the switch and pushed me in that direction so we could spend time together before he went to work and I went to work. And I've kept that. He flipped the switch to me somehow. And I'm now a morning person. God help me.
You use the word mutilated, and I mean that if you can fake it. My mom faked morning person for decades, but she's retired now, so screw that.
Really?
I've tried, and I cannot maintain the same morning start morning from the beginning of your day thing without putting myself in undue stress.
So people definitely differ on a number of these measures. I always considered myself to be the kind of person who I will do just fine so long as I have 8 hours of sleep. And if I can reliably get those, by staying up late and sleeping in late, that's fine. If I can do it by going to bed early and getting up early, that's also fine. I just need my sleep. We've had hour-long discussions of sleep before on the show, so that's not a problem.
I remember being that kid, and as the daylight savings changed, and it would still be light at 7 o'clock, and I'm trying to get to sleep, and I'm being told that I must go to sleep by 8 o'clock, and it's still light for the next 2 hours, and I can't sleep. And I had a relatively dark room, but I didn't have blackout curtains. That wasn't a thing back then, right? As much,
Right.
unless you were a shift worker. And so I remember just lying there tortured because it wasn't bright enough to read, and it wasn't dark enough for me. And I tried, had covers, and I tried all sorts of things, but happily, naturally, I end up at like 2 in the morning until 10 in the morning, and then on with my day. But that's not considered okay in a lot of industries, which was interesting because growing up, my mother's partner later in my teen years was working in the restaurant industry. So he would regularly come home at 2:30 in the morning. And so my baby brother was on that schedule because otherwise he'd never see his dad. And it was interesting to me many years later when I learned about the Japanese restaurant business tradition, where no matter what time of day you see somebody for the first time, you say "Ohayo gozaimasu," even if it's 5 in the evening, because that's the thing you say when you encounter your coworkers at the job site. If you're an office worker at 8:30 in the morning, but you say it whenever you opened up the restaurant if you're in the restaurant business. And it was an interesting moment to me because I went, oh, right. In something other than this regimented civilization of this is when working hours are and this is when working hours aren't, it is necessary to have people awake at all sorts of hours. And we stigmatize the people whose waking hours drift and pathologize it. But I'm like, actually, that's a great way to get communication between shifts. Show up to do the thing when you have your happy starting to work brain time, whether it's 8 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, even if you're the same person. And that allows you to communicate differently with different people, for instance. And it would be a useful role to have in a society. And so now, in a world building context, I kind of want to create a protagonist who is that person, right? Because then they don't necessarily have an entrenched cohort, but they would be an interesting go-between.
An ambassador to different ships and times.
Yeah.
And if you have someone whose natural rhythm is not the same as, if you have someone whose natural rhythm is 27 hours and not 24, I mean, just as if, making the perhaps unwarranted assumption that 24 hours is a natural rhythm.
Right.
That would be kind of cool. But yeah, that's cool, because I was thinking of, because we've been talking about people starting their days, who live on a planet, which does have a day. I mean, it rotates.
Yeah. We kind of expect days to be a thing, right? But they aren't always.
Yeah, ships.
And then you go when you're getting ship's time, but what is ship's time based on? I mean, it's often based on Earth for some arbitrary reason, but it doesn't necessarily, or the home planet of the ship itself. But you can't have, you have to have that ship manned at all times. I mean, like say Star Trek Next Generation. I mean, they made that clear, but we rarely saw Data running the ship when everybody else is sleeping. But although he clearly did, because you got to run the ship. It's just like you can't just have turn it off
even all the way through the night.
Yeah.
Well, so another thing that occurs to me is that we need to branch out just a bit here as we get towards the end and think about a bit more variability in morning routines. I mean, so like, what if the first thing you had to do when you got up was fetch water? Right? How much would you have from left over from the night before? would that be enough for you to get started in the way that you need to get started? Or is it something where, I just need to take off first thing to go get it,
Up to the river or the well, and how's that different in different climatic situations?
Yeah.
And biomes for that matter, is like the desert versus the Arctic. Yeah.
And what do you have to do to be in a position to go and get the water? You still have to get out of bed and put your clothes on.
Right. But I mean, so for example, if you're in an icy place, you probably have to get dressed enough to get out of bed and start a fire so that you can melt some snow.
So the deal is, though, in an icy place, you're not going to let that fire go out.
Yeah.
Or you will have frozen to death. So a lot of this is the reason why water retaining vessels become really precious in a culture where you don't have taps, and how much you retain and how do you cover them, how do you keep them cool or warm. And also, what time of day is it safe to go get water?
Yep.
If you are trying to go get water like that and there are critters around and about, this may not be safe, for instance, if we're positing this sort of less tamed, let's say, environment. And also, it was interesting to me when I was watching a lot of Edwardian life recreation shows from England, that the lowest status members of the household would go to sleep the latest and wake up the earliest, because they were doing all the tasks to get the household awake. So bringing the ovens up to the daytime temperature, the working temperature, bringing ewers of fresh water to the upstairs people so they could wash their faces, taking away the chamber pots, all these other things that were required activities for them, because things that we now have outsourced to mechanization and technology were things that required human labor. So,
making the coffee.
Yep.
You've got a coffee pot that all you have to do is tell it the night before, here's the coffee, here's the water, here's the timer, do it.
Yeah.
I don't have one of those.
It shows that coffee is not my current morning beverage of choice, because I don't have an easy coffee solution. The easiest coffee solution I have is a French press, which I think is relatively simple, but
yeah.
Well, there are many mechanized coffee solutions. We have a mechanized tea solution. We have a water kettle. And when I walk out of my bedroom in the morning, that's the first thing I do, is I fill the kettle and I start it on. So,
but here's a reason. One of the reasons I don't have a coffee maker that I set up the night before to wake up and do coffee. It would have to be on a timer. It would be ready at a specific time, and I cannot tell you from one day to the next exactly what time I'm going to be awake unless I have some place to be, in which case I'll be able to say, I will probably be awake roughly half an hour before I have to leave the house. And I will not leave the house when I need to. I'll be late.
Yeah, my current beverage solution is that I have what amounts to being a 1 cup teapot, because it's a cup with an insert and a lid. So I put a thing in it, whatever it is. I pour boiling water into it. I cap it. And then, knowing me, I walk away until it's room temperature. And then I drink it. Now, this horrifies people who want me to be more of a tea snob. If I really want it, I will drink it while it's just barely, when it's finally hit its adequate brewing point.
My God,
I was actually going to
okay.
Bring up medication.
Mm.
A lot of people have to start their day with medication.
Yep.
And I don't think I see that very often in fiction.
Yeah.
Unless you have somebody who's really defined by medical condition somehow.
I
Um,
feel like the only places that happens is cyberpunk.
yeah.
You're right though. I mean, it's yeah, it isn't something we see, but and it's not something I mentioned, but that is one of the things I need to do at the very beginning of my day. I'm lucky in that my morning meds aren't really titer based necessarily.
Hmm.
So if it's approximately 24 hours, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Because if I get up at noon and I get my meds shortly thereafter, that's when it happens. If I get up at 10 and I get them shortly thereafter, that's
That's okay.
I'm not going to wake. I've tried. I'm going to wake up at this time and then go take my meds, and it doesn't work any better than
Well, and
for any other reason trying to
and
regulate.
often medications have to be accompanied by food too. So that will put you on a very specific kind of breakfast schedule.
Mhm.
I hate those so much.
Or make a very
Yeah.
specific kind of breakfast.
I hate those so much. I try to stagger them, and then it's the every 6 hours and with food that
Oh,
it's
yeah.
such
Yeah.
an assumption that you're going to be 6:12, 6:12.
Mm-hmm.
And my preference is like 9:03, and I'm like 3 in the morning. Oh no.
Yeah.
And so it ends up becoming like 10 and 4 or 11 and 6, because 11 and 5. I just can't. That 6 a.m. is brutal. I
Yeah.
can't eat.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And combining it with some of the things we discussed earlier, I can't eat until. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good.
When one of my kids has a med that they have to take before like an hour before they eat, and they have to remember
Oh wow.
to take it and then not eat for an hour. And when your schedule is kind of screwy to begin with, if you're a student and your classes schedules vary and you're disabled to begin with, and there was a story the other day about licking an apple for an hour because they were so hungry, but they had to take meds.
Oh,
Licking an apple. Oh.
Like, they were laughing about it at that point, but I'm imagining at the time it was really horrible.
That's terrible.
It needs to be in somebody's story somewhere.
I'm sure it'll turn up somewhere, but they're an adult. They don't live at home. I would probably not be able to help them anyway because
Yeah.
not that morning thing.
The other thing for me is that my morning ritual these days also consists of spending 5 to 10 minutes making my son's school lunch. He takes a lunch from home. And I would try making it the night before, but his preference is for something like rice. And refrigerated rice is just terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't leave it out overnight. So it must be assembled in the morning. And, back when you're pregnant, you have these fantasies about what an amazing bento mom you're going to be or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've managed to get it to the point
I make
where
lunches twice every morning because of the different departure times of my kids.
where the protein is ready and just needs to be reheated briefly and then plopped on top of the rice and then sent off. And he is at a school where he can schedule his own food, so he will eat it sometime during the day while it's still warm, probably early. So far we've had just fine food safety around that. I'm hearing the people who are very strict about temperature and how long the food is left out being horrified by this. I promise he's been fine. But yeah, it's rough trying to get that. And it used to be trying to do that around all the dietary restrictions for what can be in a shared environment at a school and what my very particular child would eat. So it made mornings really exciting. to have to navigate that, plus getting a reluctant child to school, plus managing siblings, plus, wait, I thought you said your homework was in your backpack. And what do you mean you
No.
can't find your shoe? And no, it's raining. Please don't go out in that thin t-shirt. And no, it's snow. Your sandals are not appropriate. And my
It does get
morning
better.
rituals are a thing.
It continues to get better.
Ugh.
It does. I promise. It continues to get better. And at some point they move out, and aside from the occasional mom, do you remember where I put this?
If I could afford it, I would get somebody to come into my place from 6 in the morning till 8 in the morning every day and just do it for me so I could sleep in. That's my idea of luxury. That
Oh, I
might be what I would buy first with a lottery. I don't know. Aside from debts.
Well, I mean, here's another thing. I don't think any of us have a morning makeup routine, but a
No.
great many people do.
I had a roommate in
Makeup
high
and
school. I had a roommate in high school who'd get up at 5:30 every morning to make sure she had eyelashes when she showed up for breakfast. Because she was a very pale eyelashed strawberry blonde.
Mm.
And so I got woken up for some number of weeks where she was my roommate because I objected and got myself out of that situation because I was feeling quite unkind sometime during that. But she had to go shower and blow dry her hair and put on mascara before she felt like she could face the world. And it was not until I was quite old, having moved out of the house and was visiting my mother when I was in my late 30s, early 40s, before I ever saw her without her makeup on. My mother is one of those people who puts on her face in the morning and would never go
Yeah.
outside.
Did you
But
guys
she didn't
ever?
see her family that way. It was wild.
Yeah. Did you ever see that Bloom County comic about putting your face on?
Probably not really.
Do you guys know the
I don't
comic Bloom
remember it.
County?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the most famous character in Bloom County was Opus,
Yeah.
the penguin. And there was this one comic that was like, Opus, come out of the bathroom, and he goes, let me just get my face on. He walks out of the bathroom with no face. And normally Opus had this big snout that wasn't very penguiny, but it was just idiosyncratic to him. Anyway, so he's got this round, smooth surface on his face, crosses the frame, and then shunk, sticks it on, comes back and says, the magic of Velcro. That is a comic that had me laughing for ages, but there are people who feel it's terribly important not ever to be seen without their makeup on, and that becomes part of their
Well, I mean, all
mandatory
of us
morning
are
routine.
also, I think, not massively styling the hair in the morning people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people who spend a lot of time in the morning
Yep.
because sleep disarrays their hair and they get it right back into place. And
Sharing.
so
Mm-hmm. Sharing
shaving. We
spaces.
didn't talk about shaving either.
Yeah, but sharing spaces, because the hair routine brought back a thing in college where we shared a bathroom with a guy who just should have had his own bathroom instead of treating the one that he shared with a whole bunch of people like his own bathroom. Because the whole wash and dry and blow dry and style things. Some of us actually just want to shower, wash our faces, use the toilet, and go to class.
I had a partner who spent more time grooming his hair than I ever did.
Yeah.
I mean, he, blow dry, mousse, little finishing thing. I can't remember.
And we have a lot of gendered expectations surrounding this kind of appearance preparation, but it varies a lot by individuals.
I seem to
more than I
find
think
gender
people are aware.
variant people a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And some of it even.
And I think it varies across cultures too.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my husband, when we lived in Japan, was always incredibly impressed with the number of guys in the locker room at our health club who were just taking a great deal of time to be very careful about the way that their hair looked, right? Because they had a particular style that they wanted to achieve. So I think it has to do in part with the expectations of the surrounding society. And various factors.
There's so much stuff that goes on in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew people who had to shave their head every morning. So,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of reasons to spend a lot of time in the morning. I am realizing now that at this point in my life, I've aggressively chosen to have a presentation that allows me to just roll out of bed and put on clean clothes. I don't like mornings.
Hey,
I
you
hear
know,
you.
Brush the teeth and then put on clothes for the day. The outside clothes for the day, assuming there's an outside.
Well, and I think, in fact, if you're getting into world building, it's super interesting to think about what kinds of presentations are possible for the people in your world, right? What is absolutely indispensable, and I mean, so for example, in my novel, there's a point when one of my characters, who's just gotten out of the shower and is coming out, relatively dressed but still kind of damp, catches my other character not having put his mark on yet. And because people are mandated that they have to wear caste marks in this society, she says, hey, you better put your mark on. And he's like, oh man, how could I have forgotten? But he was distracted by a bunch of different stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about when I used to walk my kids to the school bus. There was whether the parents would stay there or not, and then there were certain parents who would like go off and have coffee together, because some people are totally happy to socialize first thing in the morning, and some people are like, I'm not human yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And also when is it okay to enter somebody else's house? What time are you expected to leave by? These things are also kind of culturally bounded.
Or cultural rituals. I was thinking like of the patron system in ancient Rome, where you go to your patron early in the morning and show up at his door, because that's the way you would be able to show your respect for him and possibly get a boon. It's like, yeah, you get there earlier, you're not showing respect.
Right.
Also, the whole idea of what is the earliest you can contact somebody? It used to be more of a thing with telephones. What's the earliest you can telephone somebody? What time can you send out your emails and SMSs?
How early can I call my mother is something I always think about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a thing I used to have to think about, but I know it isn't really most of the time at this point, because she's still usually up earlier than I am. But going back to shared spaces, you can have, I mean, we talked about sharing spaces with people with vastly different routines, but even if you have half a dozen people who have basically the same routine, and they're trying to perform it in the same space, but the space isn't designed for 6 people.
Yeah.
Oh, the bathroom.
Well, actually, here's another one. At what time can you stop being quiet? At what time do you just get to move freely about and make noise with whatever it is that you're interacting with? Right?
When is the noisy hours and when is the quiet hours? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And are there noisy hours and quiet hours?
Well, the cows need milking, so.
It's, my husband uses a CPAP, and he claims that I can do whatever I want and it won't keep him awake, like dishes, laundry. Yeah.
Have you tested that?
Yeah, not often, because if he's wrong, he actually does have to get up and be someplace in the morning.
Yeah.
But sometimes I do, but I try to. You ever try to wash dishes quietly?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more energy to just not clatter things. You have a lot more focus. Put things in.
I
carefully.
I was trying to eat a while back with somebody who had really sensitive hearing around silverware hitting the dishes
Mm.
just for eating, and it was just, yeah, it's worse for dishwashing.
So I'm going to point out that it's now after 5.
Okay.
We didn't get to one thing I was really hoping to, but maybe we can do it another
Okay,
time.
come on.
Which is how do you wake somebody up?
Oh,
We're not a
yes.
companion
And
animal.
like what do you say to them? Or do you not say? And also the sort of bed sharing and somebody sneaks out to brush their teeth rituals and things like that as well. But I had a friend whose name is Adam, and there's a certain kind of English speaking parent who wakes up their children by saying up and Adam.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize it was at apostrophe EM.
Uh-huh.
He thought it was up and your name.
Up and Adam.
And
Up
so,
and
yeah. But I also know people who like to wake people up with like wakey wakey eggs and bakey, and by clattering really loud terrible things and all sorts
Yeah.
of other rituals. I knock on my children's doors now, and I mumble different things at them on various mornings. I wonder if I should just have a routine so they woke up like a Pavlovian response to a certain thing, or
Well, alarm
or if
clocks are optional.
changing this. Also, how does your alarm clock wake you up? Right. So
Oh my
My-
gosh, best
gradual
alarm
light
clock
versus
ever.
oh,
The best alarm clock ever was this Moomin alarm clock that a friend of mine found when I was living in Japan. And it would say, Ohio, Boku Moomin. Then it would say, something, 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 Okinawa! So it was like, good morning, I'm Moomin. I'm going to tell you to wake up. Wake up! And it was really weird.
I had a knockoff Pikachu alarm clock that yelled a thing that I completely don't understand. So I bought it knowing that, and it would sit there going.
My kid
It was fun.
My kid has this problem where they develop a tolerance.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly. So something that works once, maybe twice, is not something that's going to work on a regular basis.
Sleep snoozing.
It just,
Me, yeah. In high school, I had 3 different alarms. I would get out of my loft bed and turn them all off and go back to sleep and not remember.
Mhm.
Yeah. I like that alarm clock that runs away.
Oh yeah, there's one now
alarm
that
clocks that
runs
run
away.
away. There are alarm clocks that I know people who set up their alarm clocks and progressively further and further away until they're right up against the coffee machine in a sequence. Although my favorite is the terrifying you awake alarm clock that if you snooze too many times sends money to an organization you hate.
Oh, that's evil.
Yeah.
wow.
But
the sound has to penetrate your sleep.
Yes.
And there are some people who get habituated to a sound very, very quickly, and it doesn't even sound like wake up anymore.
Yep. My dreaming
So
self is
my
really
my
good at
mother used to
incorporating
tell me
noise.
that in her family they used to do dingos. This was basically pouring water on somebody in bed.
What?
And when they did it, they would say "Shringus dingus" or "Dingos" because it was something Polish, and my mom found it appalling.
Okay.
There's a
I'm just going to
alarm
assume that is a Polish word for morning because it sounds a bit like the Russian word for morning.
Okay.
Oh dear. That's wow.
I cannot imagine being woken by
I would have
water.
such a soggy bed.
Right?
I would also be pissed off. It's like, what the heck?
My daughter has learned to come and just like lay a hand on my shoulder until I realize, because that's not a thing that my dreaming self can turn into a plausible thing, because I've turned the sound of the alarm into something else in my dream. Like if it's blaring, it might be an alarm that sounds off in the spaceship I'm in my dream,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Or the earthquake that manifested itself in my dream as crayons being flung.
Mhm.
All right, you guys, we've had some extra time. Got a few extra things in there. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to stop the broadcast. Oh, by the way, so next week, before we stop the broadcast, next week we have a guest. And Jamie Go is going to be here, but she is going to be here on Friday, the 31st. So please make a note on your schedules, and I will also make a note on our Facebook group and in various places so that that is more generally known. 4 p.m. will still be the time.
Okay.
But it's going to be Friday, so I will not see you for a few extra days.
Oh,
Okay?
I can get over my con lag.
Yay! Sounds excellent. And
All
now
right.
I'm going to stop the broadcast. Thank you so much.